Alrighty, hello. My name is Eliza Edmondson, and today I will be doing a presentation on September 11th, 2001, and whether or not it was a conspiracy. A background into all of this. September 11th, 2001 was a day of the most infamous terrorist attack in U.S. history. 4 different American Airlines planes were hijacked, and 2 were sent to destroy the World Trade Center towers, 1 to the Pentagon, and 1 never making it to its destination, crash landing in Pennsylvania. Bin Laden and al-Qaeda claimed responsibility for the attacks soon after. Bush was the current president in office, and he began the War on Terror to pursue targets and justice within the Middle East, such as with Iran, Afghanistan, and Iraq. The Patriot Act was also passed alongside growing concerns over safety. The conspiracy behind all of this is that due to a sequence of events and mishaps, frustration was a cause to search for an answer. Suspicion arose due to surrounding actions of the government, how quickly everything was passed, the Patriot Act, the War on Terror, and ultimately what seemed like an intrusion upon privacy. Conspiracy theorists believe such an attack was an inside job used by the government. Due to the lack of knowledge of attacks like this, appeal to ignorance can often be seen in their arguments. The belief is that bin Laden had no involvement. The towers were a controlled demolition. The Pentagon was a controlled blast, or overall just not a Boeing 757, and Flight 93 over Pennsylvania was shot down. Disproving the theory. 1. The towers. One key point of the debate of the towers is the heat-burning jet fuel can't melt steel, but yet sparks of molten metal can still be seen falling from the towers. However, to disprove this, a material that can melt under all that heat is aluminum. Which is probably what was falling from the building. Aluminum was a very common building material in planes, as well as a lot of the structure of the World Trade Center towers, such as the additional beams on the outside, nothing that was the main structural support for the steel. Therefore, since it's such an abundant material within this crash, it is more likely to melt. Not only this, steel loses a majority of its structural integrity past 600 degrees Celsius, while jet fuel burns at 1000 degrees Celsius. Once it hits 600 degrees Celsius, steel can lose upwards of 80% of its structural integrity. And due to this, it is possible that the structure could have collapsed even if the steel did not melt. Another point that's often brought up are the squibs, as you see from the picture on the right, that are being shot out of the sides of the buildings, a common sign of demolition. Squibs are known to be caused under high amounts of pressure, though, and with the explosions on top, as well as the weakening of a structure down below, will cause said squibs. Oftentimes they are amounts of air pressure being shot out with the debris. And since the air is being forced out of the building as it is collapsing, it is inevitable that these squibs are going to be forced out of the building. They also use the idea the collapse was a pyroclastic flow, often caused by demolition, or by a volcanic eruption, and while they may look similar, the materials and the blast of heat often associated with a pyroclastic flow were not experienced by onlookers, even those trapped inside the building, showing this to be false. Disproving the theory 2. The Pentagon. The outer wall of the Pentagon on this day was struck by hijacked Flight 77. It caused damages to the outer wall, but left the structure intact overall. Many pictures also showed parts that many thought could not match a Boeing 757. This led people to believe there was no plane, and if there was, it was smaller than a Boeing 757, and many of the windows of the structure were left intact. However, this does not take into account eyewitness accounts from thousands on the freeway nearby during rush hour. The windows of the building are blast-proof, meaning that they are meant to take a beating of high kinetic energy. The integrity of the wings could not penetrate the Pentagon structure due to design, leaving a smaller hole as the body and landing gear were the only strong parts that could do so. Pictures taken at the cleanup site had clear resemblance to the American Airlines logo and flight, with logo, the engines, and everything. Disproving the theory 3. Flight 93. The flight that crashed into a rural field in Pennsylvania. Not much of the wreckage was prevalent from the surface, leading to the belief that this flight was shot down by a missile. The reasoning was to kill anyone who knew the truth. Now, to elaborate on that, part of the conspiracy theory is that the American government forced anyone who knew about this plan or that could possibly leak any part of this plan or inside job was forced onto this jet, which was then shot down in a very rural area, so first responders couldn't get there in time to determine that this was actually shot down by some sort of ballistic missile, and therefore covering up the fact that this was an inside job. They also believe that most phone calls, which most that were often featured in videos or on the news, were also made on this flight. They were seen as impossible. They thought that cell reception could not reach the ground at upwards of 30,000 feet in the air, therefore thinking it was faked, and used as a cover-up saying it was a hijacking, even though the government shot down the plane. And they also believed that they also saw that for most victims, only parts were found rather than the whole body, meaning that most had to be incinerated before hitting the ground by some ballistic had to be incinerated before hitting the ground, meaning that it had to be hit by a ballistic missile. Quote, I stopped being a coroner after about 20 minutes because there were no bodies there. Flight 93 continued to disprove it, however. Not much wreckage was prevalent due to the soft nature of the ground. The plane, through multiple simulations, nosedived at full speed into the soft ground, making it so that most of the wreckage was buried under the soft soil. It couldn't have been hit by a missile, as Bush did not authorize any airstrikes of aircraft until after the crash of Flight 93. As per the phone calls, the provider for some of these planes, Qualcomm, confirmed that phone signal, even in 2001, could reach upwards of 50,000 feet before cutting out entirely, disproving the theory that the phone calls are faked, and the human remains may have been in pieces. However, enough was found to prove that the people who were flying on this flight matched up to the corpses left below. The coroner's job was done quickly, as the cause of death was clear enough he was not needed. There was enough remains to determine the people, as well as what caused the death on this flight. What makes these theories believable? Well, many of the arguments to draw you in via the journal How Do the American People Know? Embodying post 9/11 discourse, written by Laura Jones, use appeal to emotion. One of the examples that can be seen is Truth and Justice using fallen heroes from the event itself. From the Truth movement that is mentioned in a journal, a man is going on for a speech and uses his father, who was a part of the fire forces and one of the people who actually died when the buildings collapsed. He used his father to search for justice overall and to promote a sense of we need to know the truth, using an appeal to emotion, saying how much he loved them and how he was a fallen hero to the United States. Poisoning the well, misplacing the burden of proof, and straw man could also be seen used against the Bush administration. He might not have been a perfect president, but the uses of his actions were not to prove your theory, but rather to help the United States at the time. The Patriot Act being passed was not meant at that time to be an intrusion upon privacy on the internet in 2018. Rather, at the time, it was meant as stricter restrictions on TSA flights and monitoring certain activities such as internet searches that might be suspicious, such as how to make a bomb. False dilemma concerning the Pentagon site. Many said it's either a smaller airliner or it's a missile, saying that the hole is too small via any normal means, therefore it has to be the missile, without taking into account anything about the airliner itself. Denial and wishful thinking are also very prevalent. This can be seen with the Pentagon issue, with the plane clearly visible in many of the pictures. It was still denial it was Flight 77. Conclusions. The theories are untruthful to many of the solid facts found at each site. And while the facts are absurd, they're true. Each one of the events was an exceptional case that can't be generalized with the others. Most arguments are based on outrage and controversial details that can be proven by science itself. Thank you for listening.